Let me start by putting in context where I come from and how I arrived at this place. There's an old saying, what goes around comes around, and while I was preparing for today, I couldn't help but remember the late 1960s when the British Columbia government announced that it was mandating half-day kindergarten in all British Columbia schools. Well, I was in Port Alberni at the time, and the kerfuffle was much louder than it is today. And the kerfuffle was about, we don't have space. We're a logging town that's overflowing with portables everywhere. We don't have space for kindergarten in our schools. And what would we do with babies in our schools anyway? What on earth would we do with them? The provincial government had not provided a curriculum for kindergarten. And so those of us who were principals at that time were left with the responsibility of deciding what to do with the babies when they came in. Does anyone here know Joan Hall? Well, I was very fortunate to have Joan Hall on my staff at C.T. Hilton School. And the Port Alberni board made a really interesting decision. I think the only board in the province that did. What they said is, we don't have space for kindergarten in our schools. We'll build some. So they built regional kindergartens all over Port Alberni. I think there were a total of about 5. And the regional kindergarten was built on my school grounds at C.T. Hilton, which was a primary school. So we had 6 kindergarten classes in our, it was a little cement. They were built, you know, in those days you could just stack big bricks together and put some mortar in between and you had a building. That was before all the earthquake requirements. Well, we had this most magnificent open space brick building sitting in the middle of our playground with 6 kindergartens in it and 6 kindergarten teachers. And my administrative time, it was a K-3 school, my administrative time was half-time K. So I taught K with Joan Hall and her team of 6 kindergarten teachers, and we had a ball, because anyone that knows Joan and her colleagues would know she's one of the most innovative primary teachers in this province. We had all been trained as primary teachers, so we just moved right into the kindergarten role. We had learning centers from one end of that room to the other. We had experiments going on. There were science corners. We had fathers build an outdoor area where the kids could grow things. And in fact, as I go around the province today looking at some of the best kindergarten programs, they remind me of Joan and her team and what we did in those days. I became, after that, because then a kindergarten curriculum had to be developed for the province. That was in the days when the BCTF still hosted the BC Principals Group. And I was the BC Principals representative on the Provincial Advisory Committee on Kindergarten Curriculum. So spent a few years working on that team with others around the province. So what I have to say today is based on a long, long experience working with my training first as a primary teacher, working with kindergarten teachers to create evolutionary new innovative programs. Then my experience moving on through administration as a superintendent. Then when I decided not to retire and get a PhD, I went right back to my roots and left those high schools behind and enrolled in UVic's early learning PhD program. My comments are therefore not, while I work for BVPA, I haven't vetted them through the association, so I hope they'll forgive me if I say something that is not the official position of BVPA. I call full-day kindergarten, right from the day I heard it, the gift of time. The British Columbia government has given its early learners a gift of time, which for some will be a legacy for their lifetime. The implementation of full-day K, as you know, is being staged over the next 2 years. Why increase any learning services? Never mind increase full-day K. Let's start with that question. And may I say that I commend this government for, in an economic recession, going ahead and taking this step. and some of my comments that unfold will say why. I only wish we were starting with 4-year-olds too. And when you hear what I have to say, you'll understand why I say that as well. Why could the impact of this decision be so significant, not just for young children, but as an investment in the future well-being of our province? The first why, the social reality. It's more than about just academics. The economic return from investing in young children has been shown to be high through many studies. Nobel laureates in many nations have shifted their thinking from economic planning models to investing in early child development as a highest priority. One particular 40-year longitudinal study that followed infants from birth through to adulthood found that investing $1 in early learning services magnified or saved about $17 down the road, with tangible results in lower crime, fewer teen pregnancies, higher education, and higher earning levels, and therefore spending levels of the children who received extra early learning time. Quality early learning programs have been proven to increase success in school, graduation rates, workforce readiness, and job productivity. Early learning services have far-reaching effects. Is there anything more satisfying? And I'm sure it's happened to you, but this one happened to me. To walk into a highly successful hairdressing salon, slick, updated, and the owner comes over and says, "You don't recognize me and you don't remember me, but you kept me in school against all odds, and look where I am now." You are all aware from Clyde Hertzman's work that approximately 25% of BC's 5-year-olds enter kindergarten developmentally challenged by our curriculum in at least one of the 5 domains. By the way, that is rising each year that this recession continues and that poverty rises. How many of you have taught primary classes? How many people in the room? Wow, quite a crew of you. All of us probably believe that we could have identified many of those kindergarten students even without Clyde Hertzman's work. We had a gut sense of who they were, who was going to struggle, who wasn't going to make it, who wasn't going to be able to read by grade 3, because that, of course, is the greatest predictor for further school success. And we also, if we've all taught in primary, we also know how hard it is to intervene with a child after grade 3, when self-concept has already been damaged and reluctance to take risks is already cemented. Help through Dr. Hertzman has also now proven the link between those children that are vulnerable in kindergarten and the FSA results in grade 4, but now, just in this past year, identified the link with grade 7 as well. So he's moving his research up through the system, and it's becoming apparent. So why early learning services? Another reason. Young families these days face many challenges. I don't know if you know, but close to 80% of couples in Canada both work. But there are licensed childcare spaces for approximately only 12% of the child population. I did a study at Royal Roads University for them with their staff and heard horror stories about staff members. They were concerned about how many staff members were missing work, about the issues staff members were facing with a very low morale on their staff. Childcare turned out to be the biggest issue that staff at Royal Roads were facing. The horror stories were about one child in 5 different childcare centers over the course of a year, about a mother who put her baby in the womb on a waiting list, and at age 2, the baby still hadn't made it into any of the licensed childcare spaces. There was a horror story of Monday Magazine expose 4 or 5 years ago, where inspectors from government made spot visits to unlicensed childcare centers in Victoria and found babies strapped into, 5 babies strapped into a row of car seats watching television, and found 3 babies locked out on the sun deck with very little equipment or toys to play with the door shut, safely fenced in but not productively occupied. Poverty is the second issue that is affecting our families. About 20% of BC's children live in poverty. Isn't that horrific? It was 16% in the 1980s, and it was 10% in the 1970s. So we in BC have an increasing child poverty rate that we're dealing with. And you and I know that social indicators, and Clyde Hertzman has proven, social indicators are affected by poverty. Without basic nutrition, without good health care, and without stimulation to promote healthy growth, children enter kindergarten at a distinct advantage. Many of our young families in British Columbia are refugees or immigrants. Many refugees and immigrants need English as a second language and arrive in kindergarten unable to speak the English language. In general, economic crises for all of these children have worsened the conditions and made the conditions for young families more desperate. More children are arriving at the school doors hungry and neglected. The gap in developmental trajectories widen accordingly. Some children, more than others, face a number of these challenges at the same time. So you think the rest of the kindergarten children have it easy? You should read Stuart Shanker's recent work. All children face multiple challenges on their first day of school, whether they fit in any of the previous categories I've identified or not. Stuart Shanker reminds us of some of those. Even if the children move from a nurturing and regulated care environment to a first-day public school experience. Ideally, he says, when children enter school, we in the school system hope and expect them to have the capacity to, number one, attach to a new adult who will play surrogate parent for most of the day. Number two, conform to classroom rules and routines while mastering many skills. Number three, maintain a relatively calm and self-regulated state in the face of newness. How many of you have dragged them off their mother's leg on the first day of school with them wailing and clinging? Number four, understand what other children are thinking and feeling during social interactions. Some of them haven't even spent time with other children. And five, control their emotional outbursts. Well, that's all behavioral, and we expect all of that, or we hope for it, when they enter our schools. At the same time, we as classroom teachers and educators are obliged by the system to design experiences that are vital to cognitive development. Such activities require the child to listen to this list. This is all from Stuart Shanker, by the way. Work independently. Ignore distractions for long periods of time. Remember sequences. And be appropriately curious. Now, don't you love the appropriately curious? Not too curious, just appropriately curious. They also need to understand and use nonverbal signals, even though they may not have learned any. Initiate activities by themselves, which of course we expect them to do in our new play-based environments, and engage in reciprocal, collaborative, and cooperative conversations with others. They have to restrain their impulses. They have to build logical bridges between ideas and engage in symbolic play as well as real play. And then, of course, there's literacy, numeracy, math, science, and other understandings and concepts that we're obliged to present to them. These are the same children, by the way, if we now consider all of them, who possibly have never held a paintbrush, who have just arrived from war-torn Sudan missing one parent, who haven't been read to. We've actually interviewed children who've never had a book read to them. They have to cooperate with other children, or perhaps they suffer from fetal alcohol syndrome or some other condition that they've carried since birth. And some are angry, and some are afraid, and some have other feelings that we don't even know about. Imagine the confusion and the overwhelming emotions of the child who is physically, emotionally, socially, cognitively, or language challenged. So, that takes me back to my original title, The Gift of Time. Full-day kindergarten is a gift of time to all the children who need all the time they can get with an adult in a quality learning environment. Then let's think about the teacher. Consider the beleaguered kindergarten teacher and his or her 2.5 hours of instructional time that he or she has had over the past number of years. Well, 8:45, you've been there, you've seen them. Greet 18 mums or dads, help undress all 18 kids, mop up the snow that's melted on the floor, get the cloakroom tidy, show compassion for the turtle that died last night, wipe those tears, check those flushed cheeks. Could this be a fever coming on? Of the 2.5 hours that kindergarten teachers, many will tell you, they spend an hour of that 2.5 hours settling them in and getting them ready to leave, especially early in the school year, as establishing routines is the dominant challenge for them. So now we have a gift of time. We have 2.5 extra hours where we aren't preparing them to come or go. But now it's another question. It's a question of quality. Will a quality full-day kindergarten program make a difference? The literature review we conducted at UBC for the Early Learning Agency revealed that full-day kindergarten did not always guarantee long-term benefits to children. The National Education Association, in a summative examination of successful full-day kindergartens, identified 5 variables that proved to be predictive of program success or failure. Those 5 variables all addressed some key questions. Listen to the question. How will teachers use the additional time? How will teachers be held accountable for the extra time? How will teachers be trained? By the way, we have these on a slide for you later this morning. How will they be trained? How will new pre-service deliver the training? How will we in-service the teachers we already have in our school districts, especially those who have taken on kindergarten and not been primary trained? Are the teachers available? Are the classrooms available? Are the resources available? Are the links made between the kindergarten teacher and grade 1? What a glorious opportunity. And are the links being made to the community where many of the services and resources that these children need could be accessed if we took the time and the energy to access them? If BC's full-day kindergarten is to be a success and to make a difference, all of these factors will have to be addressed. Not in a hodgepodge of hit and miss initiatives, but in a systemic and systematic way. Otherwise, we will have sporadic results across this province that will further contribute to the existing unfair inequities that already face their youngest learners. Is there a systematic plan for British Columbia right now for implementation? If there is, I don't know about it. In 1989, when our team led the implementation of the year 2000, where the primary program was our prime responsibility, government set aside $6 million a year for 3 years just for primary program implementation. And it was a success. And do you know what the first thing, and in fact, the primary program carried further implementation of the intermediate program and the secondary programs, because our primary teachers stepped up to the plate. But not only did our primary teachers, so did our principals right across this province. And do you know what our team decided the very first thing we would do when 14 of us moved into government as a special group to lead that implementation? We were all field people. The very first thing we did, we organized 8 regional meetings between September and Christmas for every principal in British Columbia by themselves, not with their primary teachers, by themselves, so that they were the first off and running with the latest information and knowledge about what that primary program had to be. Subsequent to that, we brought our primary teachers and principals together at the same time. But we put our principals first, and that's because the research is so consistently clear that if principals do not support, and they can't support if they don't understand a new initiative, it will not have the degree of success in schools that we want it to have. That might give you a hint about why we're so determined to build our early learning district contacts and to build the research cadre, and we have a few other ideas in mind as well. In an ideal world in our province, new networks will be established and old ones will be revitalized. Our primary program needs revitalization. You know it and I know it. Primary teachers will tell you they have been beleaguered by demands that have taken them away, or circumstances that have taken them away from the essence of what the primary program was intended to be. Kindergarten teachers, full-time kindergarten teachers, will work with community agencies to establish new linkages and referral systems that support young families so that the children that we get in the future have already had interventions at age 2, age 3, age 4, before they even get to us. No longer will we have that first responsibility of identifying the hearing deficits. If we link up with community agencies, we can help them to find those children earlier. High-quality implementation models will be developed, piloted, shared, and adopted. The additional time provided for kindergarten classrooms will be carefully planned and consistent with both the research, the Provincial Early Learning Framework, and the primary program. For this ideal world to become a reality, system leaders at all levels, including the school district, key provincial organizations, and the Ministry of Education, will provide the necessary support, resources, time, and coordination. This should be a time for out-of-the-box thinking, a time for creativity, and a window for change. And on that notion, a window for change, let me wrap up. The window for change opens infrequently in large school systems. Studies tell us it's about once every 20 years. And they can close just as quickly without warning when things like the economic recession occurs. Windows that were open for change can slam shut. Typically, windows for change are open only, as the studies show, up to about 5 years, and then they start to gradually close. So I would say we have a 3 to 5 year window here to make these early learning initiatives a success in our schools. Full-day kindergarten is potentially birthing on shaky ground. Is it a 12-pound baby with the lifetime of potential, being born to a first-time mom with no midwife and a snowstorm outside? I think we, as leaders in the system, could make a difference as to whether that baby thrives or not. We in British Columbia, principals particularly, have an unexpected opportunity to innovate on behalf of early learners. It is a well-known fact, as I've said already, that school-based innovations are maximally effective when principals provide leadership. Indeed, BC principals who have a history of being pioneers in educational innovation now have a chance to demonstrate that early learning interventions in BC can be the legacy of a lifetime for many children, and that BC principals and vice principals do have the energy, the commitment, and the capacity to be determined to play a significant leadership role by ensuring delivery of a quality gift of time in full-day kindergartens in British Columbia.
Yeah, thank you, Janet.